Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you the best manager in the world. And I'm not kidding. Michael, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to have you with us again.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are FiRe Michael was our first Centerpiece conversation 4 years ago. This is our 4th year. So it's great to have you back.
Has it been 4 years?
4 years ago.
Wow.
Goes fast.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. We have a lot to talk about today. And before we start doing that, I want to see what this is. Because I remember last time you were here, you had this stuff which at the end of your talk you called executive jewelry, and you were carrying a bit of it. And since then, I notice everybody here has one.
Yep, this is the latest in executive
jewelry. Tell us what it is. What is it?
Well, let's start with the important parts, and that is what's different about this than the prior generations.
Okay.
What we've done in this, and I see Paul right there in the audience here, we've integrated mobile broadband into the latest generation of these products. So inside here, without any cards sticking out, you can choose from your favorite choices of mobile broadband radios to include EVDO, HSDPA, and also WiMAX if you happen to like that one. And of course, it has Wi-Fi. So you can choose any two of the 3 mobile broadband systems, HSDPA, EVDO, and WiMAX, in addition to Wi-Fi. It's all built in. All the antennas are all built in. So
and Bluetooth is in here too?
Of course, yeah.
So we have 5 radios?
Yeah. And of course, it's got the dual-core processor, the widescreen display, the fingerprint security, the smart cards.
Oh, it's got a swipe in it. What's the name of this cute little thing?
This is yet unreleased to the world.
Yeah. So what's it called?
You're seeing it here for the first time. It's the Latitude D420. The D620, D820 are already out there and being shipped in volume, and this one comes out in about a month.
1 month. I can wait for that long.
Yeah.
So anything else in here that's really spectacular or different enough to mention?
Well, it's got I didn't bring it with me, but it's got a nice little docking unit that kind of goes underneath it if you need a DVD drive. And it all fits into our Latitude D family, for corporate buyers, for people who buy lots of them. They like the consistency of the family. So the AC adapters, the docking, all that is totally consistent across the whole family so that they can kind of mix and match and share things. But I think the mobile broadband, with dual core, it's just a fantastic combination. And what you find is that when you go to a hotel where they do have a connection, you don't even bother to use it because the mobile broadband is just as fast. And of course, you can use it anywhere. You can use your cell phone. So it's we're seeing great traction with that, and I think it's a kind of a breakthrough in terms of features, and obviously people want to.
Well, you're right in the middle of this whole question of Wi-Fi or portable or mobile or what is it called and who provides it, and so 5 radios is the answer right now, and who knows it'll be 5 years from now. When you look at that thing 5 years from now, what do you see? I mean, you've got a pretty good sense of this. What is it still going to be that size? Is it still about screens? Is it still about?
Well, interestingly enough, we have a booming business with notebook computers with 17-inch screens also, which aren't really the kind you carry around every day. Yeah. But there is this theme of replacing the desktop with mobile computers, and so therefore you want the really big screen. We even came out with one with a 20-inch screen. That's not really. It has batteries, but it's not really something you carry around every day unless you were like Shaq or. But the size of these things can continue to improve. I mean, it's all a function of what do you want it to do in terms of functionality. There tends to be a limit to the appeal when you shrink the screen size.
Yeah.
When you go from a 12-inch screen to a 10-inch screen, the market gets about 50 times smaller in terms of the number of people who will actually buy that machine, even though it's lighter and has some appeal there. But it's just.
And if you get up about 15 or something, you're kind of back into desktop range. And
the average is still about 15 inches. That's what most people are buying today.
So I'm going to do the screen thing in a minute because that's really important. But before we do the screen thing, desktops. Now, I just bought a new desktop from Dell, which you probably read it as.
Oh, thank you.
and you know, you always go through this, well, what should I buy? And should it be a laptop? And no, I got a laptop. And what I wanted to get was the typical thing, which is a tower that I'm going to hide away someplace. I don't care how big it is. The more slots, the merrier. I can stick all the stuff in that you can invent for the next 3 years or whatever and stick it in there. And there's room for it. And it's got plenty of power and plenty of plugs. I mean, I used all the USB plugs within the first 4 hours. And then I had to get a station to, you know, add more. So why wouldn't people just keep doing that? What's the real reason to have a 20-inch or a 19-inch or an 18-inch laptop on your desk? Why wouldn't you always just, is there some segment there that I'm not seeing?
You know, if you're never going to move it around, certainly a desktop's going to be a better option. But, you know, people want to take their data with them. They want to be mobile. You know, they want.
They really do move that stuff around.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, and when you look at the let's call the 17-inch market sort of a semi-portable, okay? Because you're not going to be carrying the thing around every day. But if it's the only machine you can afford, which wouldn't put, you know, that's a different category than you're in. Then you might want to actually have it be a big honking machine that you take around from place to place and occasionally use as a portable.
Or if you're a CIO someplace and you don't want to buy 2 machines for these people, the one machine you would buy might be movable.
Yeah, they tend to buy more of the 14, 15-inch. And then if they have a user who has larger display requirements, they'll get a big external display.
Yeah, okay. So it's might be a combination of budget pressure and demographics where we're seeing users or workers change.
And also just the sheer kind of physics of, you know, how much can a human carry around.
Okay, so let's do the screen thing for a minute. Now, I've seen your screen. 20, 21? How big is the screen on your desk?
Currently, I have 2 30-inch screens.
It's changed since I was there.
8.2 million pixels, which I highly recommend, by the way.
And so each 30 would go for how much at the website?
They're about $2,100, something
like
that.
Fair.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. So 4.1 million pixels each. They're 2560 by 1600. And that's pretty fantastic, you know.
It's almost as good as the Calat Toothy we're going to see this afternoon.
Yeah, we do some of those visualization labs where they use a lot of those 30-inch displays.
And are they flipped up? Are they?
No, I've got them in a horizontal form, but you can put them vertical if you want. But that's like really, you know.
The
get a sore neck with that.
Folks at Microsoft, Craig Money's here, but the folks at Microsoft Research told me a couple of years ago, 2 screens, at least a 15% increase in productivity per worker. I mean, you almost can just write the check based on that fact.
Yeah, we're seeing the 2-screen thing really take off in a big way. You know, it's just the simple thing of having multiple, you know, things going at the same time, and you want to be editing, and you're on the internet. You got applications going. Maybe you've got Slingbox going in the corner, and you're watching something. I mean, all sorts of things going on all at the same time. Works great.
And why? So if it's 15%, increase in productivity is an immediate payback. I mean, you paid for that unit in the first year. And I've heard last year.
You sound like the marketing guy.
I heard 30% from somebody else. I don't know what number have you heard?
I don't know what the number is, but I'm not going back to 1 screen.
It's true, right? I mean,
it's you know, it's a significant improvement. But that's also why the desktop doesn't completely go away.
Yeah.
Because you can't really do that with a notebook. Now, I know a lot of people who also have. You can set up our notebooks now where the screen kind of extends with the notebook to an external screen instead of a replacement. So it's actually like 2 screens, one on the notebook and then one external. So when you're in your sort of docked mode, you get even more display area.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do next week in the Beach Palace. I got it all figured out. It makes sense. I don't know if it's going to work in terms of the geography or the geometry of it all, because how do you get that laptop to look just like the other screen? One's going to be smaller or sideways, the other one's going to be different size. It's still probably more productive than having 1 screen.
Yeah, Windows has actually gotten a whole lot better with that in terms of supporting different resolutions and different screens. But the most common configuration is 2 24-inch screens or 2 20-inch screens.
Right.
You know, 2 30-inch would be the extreme edition.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to try that next. If we graphed this stuff and we said, okay, so here's what you've learned from the last 5 years in terms of changes in buying patterns globally for these types of machines. A lot of people used to say, the desktop's going to go away. Well, that may not be true, right? Is there an asymptotic? Are we approaching some kind of partition of the market where will always be towers? There will always be a certain number of people who buy desktops, or do they finally just disappear?
I don't think they disappear. I mean, there's all sorts of applications where desktops have a real place. And certainly if you want the fastest, most powerful machine, you're almost always going to get a desktop. Mm-hmm. If you want the least expensive machine, you're almost always going to get a desktop also.
Yeah, yeah.
You also have this factor of the emerging markets coming in and playing a big role where, for example, we just did a project, or we're still doing it, with the government of Mexico, where we're putting computers in all the schools in the whole country. It's about $600 million.
There must be inkwells. Oh, we'll get back to that later.
No, they're not. So, anyway, so, government of Mexico, has a lot of money, but they don't have all the money in the world, so they're wanting to, it's actually a combination of desktops and notebooks, but when it comes to economics, a desktop is always going to cost a bit less.
Right.
So as you have these emerging markets growing very fast where there are tons and tons of people, initially those are going to be desktop markets.
Yeah, which is interesting. Just for price alone, right? Just price alone.
Price, yeah. I mean, there are perhaps other issues too, but price is the simplest one.
Yeah, yeah. So let's do one more riff at this. When you look at that box in 5 years, what does it do in 5 years that it's not doing now? Let's say it's the same basic form factor. It still has probably a typing pad on it of some kind. It's still got a screen of some kind. What is the difference between what it does in 5 years compared to what it's doing now?
Well, I think the broadband communications continues to improve at a pretty huge
So you're
rate.
putting a lot of video down probably by then.
Yeah, I mean it's probably not unlike what you could get in a super high-end workstation today that was $8,000 or $10,000, but then shrunken down to a very small notebook. And probably some speed improvements if you go out 5 years.
Is it a TV set?
Well, I mean, TV is just another IP signal, so
right.
Yeah, we can put.
It's a TV set, right? So basically, whether you're pulling down stuff off the net or whatever you want to call it, you're running a lot more video than you're running now because you can get it faster. We're going to get those 10 gig pipes we're going to borrow from Larry Smar. And so down it comes, and you're carrying with you not just the thing that used to be a local display, now it's a display for the world's video content. And wherever you are, you're getting that in real time or you've got it on your machine already. Which changes the functionality of it quite a bit in a sense, doesn't it? I mean, it takes it into, we're talking about this in a minute, but into entertainment and into lots of new types of content that we're not using right now very much.
Yeah, I mean, what is the domain of the PC and what's the domain of the entertainment or consumer electronics world in the home, those are really blurring quite a bit, particularly as all this data goes to a digital format. So you see with Media Center, and that sort of thing, it's just become real easy for people to use their PCs for other things in the home.
Mm-hmm. So, well, let's just go there for a second. The whole Media Center thing has been a confused marketplace, I would call it. Everybody wants it. No one does a very good job of getting it somehow. And lots of folks trying to engineer for it. I'm not sure that they're engineering for the users as much as they are for the opportunity. Is it as big an opportunity as I think you and I think Microsoft, Sony, is it really as big as it seems, or is this going to be a mistake? Are we going to look back later and go, no one wants a computer in the den because in the den they want to relax?
I don't think it kind of happens overnight. I think of it as an N+1 kind of strategy that gradually unfolds where people see that they can do an increasing number of things with their PC. And so for some people it might be as simple as, hey, I've got my PC and now I can do music. And then they figure out a year later, hey, I can do music and I can do photos. And they figure out, hey, I can do video and I can have this wireless network and I can move things around the home and distribute it. It's not going to happen kind of overnight.
Yeah.
And certainly in the PC-centric homes, I think Media Center has the best opportunity.
And when you say PC-centric homes, what does that mean?
Well,
These guys.
yeah, these guys, it's hard to say, but I think you could envision, more than one, answer going on in the consumer electronics world. I happen to think that the PC-centric homes are going to, be the predominant ones in developed countries.
But by saying centric, since everybody's already got PCs, I assume you mean more than just owning one.
Yeah, they're sort of, they're a PC-centric home is somebody who they probably have digital music, they probably have digital photography, and so they're already sort of acclimated to that world, and it's fairly easy for them to sort of migrate, those things into their computing.
Well, let me just for the sake of discussion, look at the folks today that are using this stuff. I mean, I have lots of friends, probably like you. I haven't seen your house, but who have often hired somebody, and they've come in and done a marvelous job at either a home theater and by the way, have a lot of the digitized stuff ready to go and home server and fantastic setups. Probably 20 grand to get it done, but beautiful. But that's rare. I mean, I don't have out of 100 friends, that's 2, or 3. And even for me, I'm fairly techie, but I mean, everybody else doesn't have that yet. Everybody's got iPods. And you kind of watch the inroads that the iPod makes in terms of, well, here's the iPod, now they're going to make speakers, now they're going to make some more speakers, now they're going to make this thing and connect it here. And here's this stupid little device which only does 3 things with your thumb, right? And yet I suspect that the iPod, in its own, if you didn't see what size they were, you just gave them 2 names, A and B, the iPod's making better inroads than most media computers into that living room. People are looking for ways to connect that to their car and to their speakers in their den, And so this question of the Swiss knife keeps coming up. We've been talking about this the last couple of days. So is it really the Swiss knife that wins, or is it that device which is easy to use? I think of it as left brain and right brain, right? If you're in the den, you don't have to think about Windows not working or whatever, and it's just no worries. You just turn it on and it goes. Saul was talking last night about getting HDTV put into his house here and turning on one of the 4 remotes that was supposed to activate it, and nothing goes on. With little post-its on it saying, which one to do first. So as long as that's the iteration of design, is it possible people will just, 80% of the folks will just say no thanks?
Well, if it doesn't work, they will. I think, you might be looking at it in a little bit too binary fashion. I think you're going to see, and in fact, I think we're already seeing, usage emerge in a fairly gradual way. So people say, hey, I've got my PC, I've got music on my PC because to get it in my iPod, I had to put it on my PC.
That's it, yeah.
So that's, and now I want to use that music in different ways. And I got pictures, now I want to, use those. And now I've got some kind of digital video signal, and now I want to play around with that. And so I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I don't think it's going to be an either or. I think that, we are seeing pretty good demand in these, we call them the PC-centric homes, where they're linking audio and video into their PC. So that's kind of what we see happening. But it's not going to be it's all done by the end of 2007.
Yeah. So it's a fairly gradual design change rate and acceptance rate.
We believe so.
Do you think when it's all done and it becomes a larger, maybe at some point it goes into the exponential hockey stick story, is it then a very simple device? Do we go beyond the normal computer and it's something with a black front and it's like
see,
a
this
Slingbox?
is the perhaps the difference in distinction. The PC doesn't necessarily have to be in the living room to provide
Content.
that content into the living room or into the bedroom or anywhere else.
True. I mean, we've talked about the home server and which closet that gets stuck into.
And it might not be in a closet.
It
It might be
office.
it might be the main PC you have is the home PC server.
Right, which I'd call the office PC, but maybe that's not it. Are we missing a device here that, just as the iPod has kind of provided a pulling for audio down and maybe at some point more video, are we missing something for photographs? HP is very much about printing stuff out. You guys are very about, but that's on paper. And you know, a lot of guys have tried these startups where it rotates through a frame on your office desk or something through the internet. Is there something missing there that we're ready for that would take that whole functionality of pulling down things from your camera or from the net and sharing them with others? Is there a missing device, display device there, you think?
It could be. You know, the display technologies are all there. I think it's a function of how do you want to use it, and how do you display it, how do you make it really easy for the customer.
Right. You go all the way back to Bill Gates doing that hallway number with all those Hitachi screens, and that was ridiculously expensive when he did that. But today, you know, it's not. It's getting to the point where you can get small LCDs and small screens for reasonable amounts of money.
It's getting a whole lot easier.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to kind of jump back to a more global view. You were talking about Mexico. We've really gone through a period of time, well, since you've been here, where Dell began in your room and had most of its early market share gains in the U.S. You're a global company. You've always been of that mind, as far as I could see. But now the rest of the story has really taken off. A lot of years of investing and talking about what could happen in Mexico or what could happen in South America or China. Now it's happening. And first of all, when you see, you probably have as good a CIA-like vision of this as any of us have. When you see the future of selling personal computers going forward, what are the thermometers doing? You know, where are the really big stories, and are there surprises in that story? And what do you see?
Yeah, you can pretty much look at GDP in the different countries. We look at cell phones a lot because they're sort of a precursor to computing. Okay. You look at really just large population bases, and where there is some kind of competitive structure for telecom in these countries, the market's taken off like crazy. So, Brazil, we have 74% growth in Brazil. You have places like, Korea, India, China, all the obvious candidates, all the countries in former Soviet Republic, Eastern Europe, all those.
What's Russia like right now?
Russia's a high growth market for sure. It's also got corruption problems, which is not uncommon in some of these markets. You have to be careful in terms of how you operate there. But there are a lot of high growth markets right now where penetration is fairly low still. We have 11% of our revenues. We have 11% share. Share of the market outside the United States. Yet 70% of the market's outside the United States. So we see enormous opportunities in these countries that are growing quite fast.
Right. I mean, I understand, and I see the same thing. I think sometimes you get criticized by Wall Street guys for this very fact that there's that basket of fruit, go get it. How fast can you, and all those questions, right?
Well, we're going reasonably fast, but never fast enough. I mean, the last 3 years, our business outside the U.S. grew from $12 billion to $22 billion. So we added $10 billion in organic growth in the last 3 years outside the U.S. The other $10 billion in organic growth came inside the U.S. So we had $20 billion in the last 3 years. Never fast enough, but
never fast. Let's go back to the U.S. for a minute, and then we'll go out again. But in this country, do you see that obviously there are cycles. We went through the that kind of Y2K thing and the valley of death after it. And is it just going to go like that forever, or do you get to a point where there is kind of not a saturation, but you hit the replacement cycle story, and that's it? You've saturated the growth part of the curve, and what you're doing is replacing things after that. Are we in that arena yet? Or does it never happen?
There's definitely, an increasing part of the developed market, like the U.S. being a great example of that, where it is much more of a replacement cycle kind of market. And you come out with new features, you come out with new capabilities, and that drives replacement even faster. Of course, if you don't, then nobody replaces. So, as an industry, we've got to provide enough compelling features, benefit, productivity, value, excitement to cause people to say, hey, this thing is way better than the thing I had 2 or 3 years ago, so now I'm going to get a new one.
Right.
That's just the technology industry.
But so is there? We've then kind of found all the nooks and crannies in terms of serious growth rates, maybe, and it's a replacement story. I mean, for instance, when we had 100 billion or 500 billion a year, whatever it is in defense contracting, do you see that? I mean, you guys are government defense mavens. I mean, does some of that boot you up? Do you get your unfair share of that market?
We have leading share in the government market. Actually, in the U.S., we have leading share in all different customer segments.
Does military spending, is that a part of that story?
Yeah, I mean, whenever there's a cycle up or down, we follow those. Yeah. But fundamentally, we're sort of in a really important industry called productivity. If you want to be productive, you give people tools, you give them computers, you give them servers, you give them all sorts of modern capabilities. So that's not really changing. I think there's going to be enormous growth in these markets outside the U.S. The U.S. will continue to be the largest market for a long time just because of its sheer size of the economy.
So now let's bounce back. When do these other markets cross the U.S. market? When do you see China crossing the U.S.? When do you see India crossing the U.S.?
Yeah, it's a long time.
20 years?
Yeah, probably. In cell phones it happens a lot sooner, but actually in computing it's a little bit more tied to absolute GDP because in computing you have all this investment in servers and making people productive, which is really a function of GDP output.
Right. And in the U.S., we went through a period of about 10 years or more when everybody was saying, where's the beef? A lot of money was being spent on computing. All the studies that were run showed there was no productivity increase. And a number of stories were written, Harvard Business Review, these guys wrote this, where's the beef story? And obviously the beef was there. It just took a certain amount of, either a certain percentage of workers or a certain amount of infrastructure to put this all together, or the right applications had to be on those machines. Suddenly there was a lot of beef. Even Greenspan was surprised by the productivity change. He got religion. Same story everywhere? Do you go for 10 years in China with not a great amount of productivity increase, and then you suddenly get it? Or is it something that we've all learned about and put into the system now, and they can just go?
Well, the productivity improvements are there. There's also a question of how do those get distributed out in competitive markets. So if you imagine a hypothetical industry with 10 players in it, and 8 of them aggressively invest in technology, and 2 of them don't. The 2 that don't, presumably, if they're not as productive, they're not as successful. The 8 that do, become more productive. But it's not necessarily they just all become super successful. Those productivity gains, get priced away. The industry becomes more competitive. And those industries then seek some kind of new level. Or expand, and it's a function of kind of what's going on in the ecosystem. I mean, you see even industries in the U.S. where there haven't been, companies that have in certain kinds of industries who've really broken out, and differentiated themselves using technology. I mean, we're sort of
mud wrestling.
Yeah, well, I wasn't thinking of that one, but we're sort of an easy example where you look at our inventory efficiency and supply chain, those kinds of things. Well, maybe only 5 or 10% of the companies on the planet have done those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So there's an enormous wave of productivity that's still left, but does that mean that it all gets translated into wealth? No, industry becomes more competitive, delivers more value, and economic.
It sounds like part of what you're saying is that growth is available today at a kind of when the gun goes off, that you wouldn't expect to see an emerging nation go for 10 years with no productivity increases. You'd expect to see some increases from the get-go, probably.
Well, I mean, if you look at China or India, all of the same kinds of desire for productivity that exists in the U.S. or Europe exist there. And so when people talk about the economies there growing 7 or 8%, the IT economy is probably growing at, I don't know, 35, 40%.
Right. Right. I think India, I would just flatly state that that's already proven that this is true. Yeah. A little less in China maybe, but so where are the surprises hidden? Are there countries that you see coming up that are buying more PCs kind of suddenly on the landscape that you think will be rising stars based on what you've seen? Where are the next wave of new countries?
I think it's any places where there are large populations and lots of connectivity.
Well, name two.
Pretty simple. Well, I mean, Korea is a really interesting example. It happens to be one where we're growing just like unbelievably fast. And, it's got 72% broadband penetration.
Right.
It's the real broadband, not
Right.
the kind of mini broadband
Right.
we have here in the U.S.
Right.
You have massively multiplayer online gaming is going nuts there. 1 out of 10 people play Lineage in Korea. It's just kind of a hyper example of what can happen in an economy when you've got broadband, you've got a government that's driving, all these kinds of things.
All the things are going the same way.
Yeah.
I think of them as being the poster child for bandwidth. Of course, I don't think there's anybody else. Maybe Japan, but probably not. Who's got more?
Japan would be
Number
right
two,
up there. They're
yeah.
doing a lot of fiber with the density they have.
Yeah. So even though I understand what you're saying, I don't think of them as being an emerging nation in that way. I think of them as being a leader. They're ahead of us. They're number one. Are there countries that are investing in telecom today that are going to be like South Korea in 10 years, 5 years?
There are a lot of countries in Southern Asia that are, desirous of that sort of growth.
I mean, obviously, Singapore's already done it.
Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, et cetera, are all kind of pointing in that direction.
If you had to pick among ASEAN countries, who would you pick as the next?
Well, I think Malaysia has done a pretty good job of focusing on these kind of investments and attracting the right kinds of investments and driving their infrastructure. It's still got a ways to go, but it's got some pretty exciting things going on there.
You have a plant there, don't you?
We have a large plant. We're about 7% of the GDP, and it's an important place for us.
That's amazing. That's like the Nokia story of Malaysia. Yeah. Okay, so and I want to just do one more. South America. You mentioned Brazil, huge growth rates. What else do you see down there? Chile's obviously done well economically. Do they stand up head and shoulders above everybody else, or is?
I get frustrated sometimes when I go down to South America. I kind of talk about, hey, when is this going to be the land of potential, not of realized potential, not you don't want to be perpetually the land of great potential.
Right.
And they have a bit of a problem in getting out of that. A lot of problems with corruption and tax collection and that sort of thing. But the PC market is booming right now in Brazil. Certainly booming for us. But I think these countries that are not in Southern Asia, China, they're going to have to really work very, very hard to stay competitive.
It seems just on a global economic scale that I was in China recently. I was talking to a lot of students. I was trying to explain this idea of where the consumption center is moving, and I said, well, 10 years ago, if you had a map of the world, and you could take a pin, and you'd say, where's the center of all consumption? It's probably somewhere just east of Long Island in the water. and 10 years from now, it's going to be somewhere in the South China Sea, I think. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, China's just going nuts.
China and those other guys we're talking
China
about.
and Southern Asia.
Yeah. So if we go out 5 or 10 years, a little more than 5, there is so much potential there compared to, I think, we'll call it saturated, but a nearly saturated American market. do you see 2x, 3x, 4x, or do you see really large-scale increase in consumption there over the next 5 years or 10 years compared to what we will see in Europe and the U.S.?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the current sort of period, our businesses in India and China have been growing in unit terms roughly 40%. Mm-hmm. We don't see anything like that here in the U.S.
Right.
So, and it looks like that it's quite sustainable.
Yeah.
Particularly when you push into the second and third tier cities, mm-hmm. and you push into, small business and education, mm-hmm. and an emerging consumer market. Mm-hmm. These markets have a long, long way to go.
Yeah, I mean the story. If it's a repeat of the story of Dell to date in the U.S. market, there's a whole government business story, then there's a consumer story that follows. There's the servers, there's the storage, there's the printers, there's the infrastructure, there's various evolutions of those things as people can afford improved
equipment. China is already our third largest market in the world, mm-hmm. for us. So mm-hmm. It's not
already. Yeah.
Bigger than Canada, bigger than France.
Mm-hmm. Well, Canada, I mean.
Hey,
but, yeah.
They buy a lot of computers up there.
They do. Okay, so not just Dell, I mean probably General Electric as well, but when you look at this, there's an Asian company there, right? I mean, you may choose to stay in Austin or, but basically that's an Asian company. We have a lot of customers now. Instead of saying the usual thing is a 50-50 split or whatever we're kind of used to so far, we're probably at a 30-70 split or some other kind of numbers where so much of the money is coming from customers in Asia that it makes sense to have managers who are Asian, it makes sense to have the sales force is Asian, it makes sense to have local fabs, increasing number of fabs there that are doing that, and so on and so on and so on, right? Design happens locally.
Yeah, that's starting to happen. I mean, we have 2 factories in China now. Mm-hmm. We're going to put one in India. Mm-hmm. We have, sort of the full gamut of activities there. We'll spend about $18 billion in procurement in China. So we're a pretty big...
$18 billion over what period of time?
This year.
Yeah.
So we're a pretty big customer of a lot of
yeah.
Suppliers. And so, you're right. There's a lot of things that are moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And again, not just for you, but I think for the world. But it's pretty dynamic, isn't it? I mean, this is something which every morning, or every year, whatever you put it, this is a really dynamic situation. You and I talked when I was visiting you last down in Texas about India, and at that time, I think you asked me not to talk about it, but then you talked about it publicly yourself, so now I feel okay. And you expressed some kind of hiring plan for India for the next 12 months, I think, or 12 to 24. And it was, if I remember, it was in the 6 to 10K range.
It's actually 3 years.
Okay, 3.
Yeah,
so
we said we have about 10,000. Or last time I was there, we had about 10,000, and our plan is to have about to grow to about 20,000 mm-hmm. in 3 years.
Over 3 years, okay.
Right.
And this brings up a question I'd like to ask you, not just as Dell Computer Chair, but a lot of guys who are CEOs. You're watching America. We've spent some airtime here just today looking at India. Mm-hmm. We've got some very smart guys from India telling us about what it's like to be outsourcing. So
I see one from right there.
Azim Premji is here. Yeah, okay. And Rafiq Tassani is here. So the question I've got in my mind is this something, I found you pretty open about talking about it, but I think a lot of guys don't do that, who are CEOs or chairmen. And is that your experience? Is there a lot of outsourcing going on out of American corporations without discussion, without public relations, without doing a press release on it or whatever, it just happens?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, in our case, it's not outsourcing because those people work for us.
Right. Okay, so there are two categories of interest here.
One
is where you hire folks for your own.
You might be confusing it with having global operations, which is different than
okay,
outsourcing.
Fair distinction. So we can do both if you want to, but in terms of your hiring plans.
So you're not the only one who's confused. So
no, that's good. I'm sure there are lots of it. Do you do any outsourcing?
We do some, but most of what we do is we globalize.
You hire your own guys.
We grow our business around the world.
So we'll just talk about that part of it. And if it's 10,000 over 3 years, when you look forward, I mean, I think you're probably going to see not just India, but China and other places. But let's just look at India for a moment. The workforce that'll be working for Dell is growing at a pretty good clip. That's true for Microsoft, I know, because they've made the same kind of announcements. Same numbers almost. Pretty interesting. Is this also true, as far as you can tell, for other American companies? Are these numbers larger than we would have thought?
Yes, they're large numbers, and every single one of those people needs at least one computer, which we like very much.
Yeah. So it's a double pickup.
So you got to get a factory.
But they're working for you. You got to give them.
No, I'm not just talking about our workers are a very small percentage
but the
of
GE
the workers
guys and all these
employed in
guys.
the IT field or other knowledge industries in India. So it's a huge growth market for us to sell our products.
Yeah.
In addition to just the resources there that are fantastic.
Yeah. I think, as you mentioned, 1.1 million knowledge workers in India right now, with they're generating 400,000 engineers a year.
Yeah, and can you imagine that they're going to each have a PC? Mm-hmm. There you go. Okay, it's not that hard to figure out.
All right, so let's go back from the structure of the economic side of this and take one more stab at the technology side of this. Do you see in some way the computers, aside from the keyboard and the screen thing, if that all breaks apart, a lot of people say that they break apart, and the computer just disappears, right? Is that a vision that you share? Does the computer become some small thing in my pocket somewhere, and the screen is over there, and the keyboard is back in the office, or do these things remain glued together? And
I think it will continue to take many different forms. You'll have watch computers, pocket computers, car computers, whatever, all sorts of different instantiations. There isn't going to be one. There isn't going to be one kind of universal device for all usage and all applications.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then in that new world, 5 years or 10 years from now, where all those things are now different evolutionary pathways for computing, they still have the same standard operating system to run across all those things, or do they have different operating systems?
The most important thing in all of that is that the data is somehow connected together, and that you have a consistency of data, across all these different devices. That's the convergence that
so there's a little pressure back toward the web, in other words.
Yeah, toward the web or the server or some sort of service that provides that consistency.
All right. Do computers at some point become, someone was talking this morning about free nodes, a friend of ours from Sweden, how more and more business, it's a little bit like the open source idea, but that instead of having a business where you consider that you charge for every single thing, that in fact there are reasons in good business practice to have things become free, that actually increases your audience and brings people in, they can upgrade later. And do you see kind of an evolution of the model where, whether it's internet cafes being an early sign of that, or are there ways where people will have more and more access through computers than they have today? Will they have access in ways which change how the computer looks? Will there be more internet cafes in the world? Will it get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to use a computer somehow? Will people who really don't have much money find ways of getting access to your machines?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad set of questions there.
Yeah.
The internet cafe phenomena is generally in, countries where the price of the PC relative to average income, makes it very, very difficult. It's true that the price will continue to come down. So that's going to help offset. I mean, if you look at sort of the number of internet users in China versus the number of PCs, you have a lot more people using the internet than actually own PCs. So that's sort of pent up demand because the internet cafe I think is sort of a transient mechanism before you really have.
It's an upgrade edge, right? It's like a leading edge where you upgrade through that to owning your own.
Yeah, it's something you do on the way to kind of getting your own. But the cost will come down. I mean, there are other economic models and considerations. certainly people have figured out that search is quite valuable, and there's other ways to take some of that, some of those dollars, and then have that improve the economics of the PC. Well, there's probably a way to do that.
Right.
There are ways to sort of change the dynamic from a from a purchase point to make it more of a subscription. Much like you would a phone kind of service.
Like a Grameen Bank approach.
It's $5 a month or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Let's go back to the other end of ownership, and you've done this last year. You bought Alienware. So you went for the top end, which I thought was smart. And I know you're excited about gaming. We've talked about it. Does this become it seems like a rapid growth area? I mean,
gaming is a high growth industry. It's bigger than all of the major sports leagues combined in terms of revenue, growing quite a bit faster. And it's also an aspirational component of how people are using these machines. You look at things like World of Warcraft, you can't actually play it on a console. So you see those markets booming, and if you don't have a large screen, you don't have a fast processor, you lose the game. You get killed.
You're killed.
Yeah, so
That's
we like that. That's our kind of market.
So, in order to not get killed, my kids get killed all the time.
Yeah. I lose in email if I don't have a fast processor and a big display too.
So take us out. How big is this? Does this become kind of not a saving grace, but this is an exciting new area in computing that didn't really exist before. So just when things are looking a little tired at the high end of a PC world, here's a new high end, right?
Yeah, there are a couple different high ends. I mean, we always served the enthusiast high end user, and a year or so ago we came out with this 24-inch display, and we thought we were making it for guys who were designing jet engines and doing protein folding and DNA analysis, and then we had all these gamers,
World of Warcraft,
and buy all these displays, and we ran out. And so we said, well, that's interesting. What are they doing? And so we went and figured that out. So we came out with a 30-inch display. And again, here come the gamers. They want to buy all the 30-inch displays. So it's a part of the market that is just hypersensitive to performance improvements. Graphics processors. We come out with these machines that have 4 graphics processors in them, and are just ridiculously fast and capable.
Right, and that is, I remember when the defining specs went from business machines to consumer machines. I think this was 1997, and it was kind of a surprise to everybody. It was like the most difficult specs were always business, and suddenly it was multimedia. And now I think we're seeing the same thing again, right? Where the gaming world will create the most demanding specs and drive the rest of the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of businesses could care less about that. So there is a part of business, the kind of design,
the old workstations,
CAD CAM, right? Any of all the stuff that used to be on Unix workstations, CATIA and those kinds of applications that all went over to Windows, by the way, where we have 60% share of that. Those machines and the high-end gaming machines are kind of like from the same family.
But do you see some bleed through into? I mean, isn't it likely that we'll see once you get everybody in the office set up with 2 or 3 or 4, screens, right? Isn't it likely that some applications? I mean, you take Excel charts, whatever, but you'll start finding ways of making better use of those screens once they're there in place, and that the game, what we'll learn from gaming, could be applied to other social interactions, could be applied to collaborative work, could be applied to learning physics or whatever.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I mean, you see, the multi-screen actually started in the office. We've been working with all the developers game developers to say, how do you make use of multi-screen in a game environment? Because most of the game developers hadn't really even thought of that so much. So there's a lot of opportunity to cross-pollinate on both sides.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like a natural thing to have happen, doesn't it? I mean, all that technology that gets worked out for a segment is probably going to come down into the office or into other civilian uses, that are not typically gaming. Maybe they're entertainment, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
you
and
watch
a lot of the game developers have done a very nice job with user interfaces and making things very intuitive and you just look at these online communities,
right.
And they're massive.
So let's go back to entertainment for a minute. We're back in the living room again. And what if you're watching an NFL game and you have 2 screens instead of 1 screen, or you have one very big screen which is split into a number of screens? Same technology basically, and you're getting stats here, and you're getting the God's eye view of the stadium from this screen. You're getting the side view here at quarterback height. Isn't that all going to kind of? And then you're online with all these guys who are telling you you're making bets, or you're talking to each other about.
And if you want to take it a step further, if you work for a big company and they don't want their their sort of IT universe infected by all that, you've got this nifty little thing called virtualization. Mm-hmm. So you can create a virtualized window that is safe from all these wacky things that are going on that exist within the user's PC. So they can kind of do both at the same time.
I was going to ask you that next. It's right here, virtualization. so do that for servers for me for a minute, because it's so important. It seems so important to you guys. So do the virtualization bit in 3 sentences, and let's get that on the table, and then.
Okay. Well, what's going on here, of course, is that we have enormous gains in processing power with dual core, multi-core, quad core, 64-bit, server processors, scale out technology. All these machines in some kind of grid or cluster, and then what you want to be able to do is, if you have a 4-core processor and a 4-socket server, it's like 16, machines. You want to be able to partition this thing as virtual machines, that are protected from each other, and so you can allocate resources, among them. Dynamically move things around, and also just run multiple different operating systems all in the same box.
Right. And for the customer point of view, it allows you higher optimization of what you've got.
Higher utilization. You had this problem of one application, one server.
Thing. Yeah.
Now you can say, well, this application we can put 5 of these on one server.
Mm-hmm. And it seems as though Dell, the company, is saying this is dramatic. This is a big deal. Is that the
virtualization is a key part of scale out for us, and we have one of the fastest growing areas for us is services, where we help customers kind of deploy all these things. Virtualization is one of those fast growing services areas.
Yeah, and is it a sea change? Is it a big qualitative change?
For scale out to really be meaningful, you have to have virtualization. Otherwise, you get hundreds of thousands of processors,
you're not using them effectively.
The application developers, the database providers are all moving in that direction also.
Yeah.
So, it's just a natural.
Right. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question, then we'll let folks here ask questions. And this, I think, is a question that a lot of folks are asking about the company in general. Mm-hmm. And the Dell Direct model. So for so long, you've written a book about it. It's the marvel of the world in terms of solving a whole lot of problems simultaneously in terms of customer contact and efficiency and manufacturing, so forth. Nobody doubts that, as far as I know. But the question I guess I've got is, and I think the question that the market may be asking right now is, okay, you've done the perfect job of that, or as nearly perfect as can be done. But as your competitors learn from you and start implementing exactly the same kind of things that you've done to make that all work for Dell Computer, do you lose the gap, the competitive advantage gap that you may have had in the earlier years? Does everybody become efficient? And then you lose that competitive advantage, or the huge gap in competitive advantage that you had coming out of the gate?
Yeah, it kind of depends on how we posture ourselves competitively, and I could see how in the last year, someone could reach that conclusion. I think, we kind of underestimated what was going on competitively. Mm-hmm. One way to
you didn't think Carly was going to get fired. I'm
sorry.
Well,
I'm not going to go there, but you said it, not me. Anyway, we used to be about 3 times more profitable than our competitors. Now we're about 2.5 times more profitable than our competitors. But I think we kind of underestimated how fast some of them were moving. So we're changing our approach to this. Making a lot of investments around customer experience, adding thousands of people to take the experience levels to a whole different level, and really focusing on just the fundamentals and doing what we do well around supply chain execution, great products, great service.
So you think you can maintain that differential? I
think there are lots of opportunities for us to do quite a bit better than we did last year.
Yeah.
Some of the competitors did better. I think we didn't recognize how competitive the market was going to be.
Right. Do we have questions from folks on the floor?
We heard a lot about display screens already. Why isn't Dell shipping already a laptop that doesn't have a display screen but has instead stereo goggles?
We don't get a lot of requests for those.
Right, but that would let the cell phone version display in full resolution on a physically tiny thing that you could carry around.
Yeah, I've played around with some of those goggles. I think I haven't seen a pair yet that I would want to use on a persistent basis.
Yeah. I would agree. And please identify yourself when you ask your question.
Sure. Davin Usala, Infotech Research Group. I've had a couple of conversations over the last couple of days here at FiRe just about the U.S.'s role in the world economy. You're mentioning you're opening plants in Malaysia, investing in India. What do you see as the U.S.'s role going forward as, I think we probably collectively agree that this is better for the world economy. Where does the U.S. fit in your opinion, in, say, the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, you didn't ask the question, but I'll say it anyway. I mean, we just opened our biggest plant in the world.
In the U.S.?
In North Carolina.
Yeah.
A huge plant. And we are opening sites all over the U.S. We opened a new one in Oklahoma, put 3,000 people there. We've got a new small parts package hub that's delivered 15 million packages in 18 months in Ohio. So we're still growing, investing in the U.S. I think, every economy has to go through some kind of transition. In the early 1900s, you had 40% of the people in the U.S. working in agriculture. And we had mechanization coming, and people were scared. What are all these workers going to do? Mm-hmm. Well, now you have less than 2% of the population in agriculture, and it all worked out pretty well. Those people figured out how to do things that were more valuable than working out in the fields. Designing pharmaceuticals, networks, computers, airplanes, all sorts of things that are quite valuable. The other great thing from a U.S. perspective is that, as far as the global economy is concerned, I mean, the U.S. is totally one. Okay, U.S. has more than half the wealth in the world. I don't think it's going to be able to maintain more than half in 30 or 40 years. But hey, if it's got 35 or 40% in 30 or 40 years, and the pie's a whole lot bigger.
The pie's getting a lot bigger.
Yeah, and so anytime a nation industrializes, it rings the cash register of American companies, because it needs modern technology. So that's a positive for us. But we're not going to win by hanging on to things in which we are no longer competitive in. So the economy's got to transition. Easier for me to say because I'm not a politician with guys hanging out my office who lost their job making T-shirts. But that's how to.
Scott Foster from HSBC Securities. What's the potential for NAND flash memory complementing and perhaps replacing hard drives in PCs?
There's definitely potential for fast boot scenarios, and as semiconductor processes continue to improve. You could replace hard disks. Right now, it's too expensive. You know, some have tried these sort of hybrid type approaches where you put both of them together, which definitely makes sense for a fast boot kind of scenario. But right now, it's just too expensive, and you know, people have been predicting the demise of the hard disk for a long, long time. I saw Seagate just came out with a 750 gigabyte hard disk.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Hi, Tom Stanage from The Economist. My Mac seems to boot up quite quickly without any NAND flash, incidentally. So I really don't
Here
understand.
it comes, okay.
It's a design fault of the software, surely. Anyway, Mark's already asked you one of the questions that's being asked about the Dell model, the Dell Direct model, namely, haven't your competitors started to imitate it rather better than they were before? The other criticism that's now being leveled at it by some analysts now is that the model is outdated in another way, which is that if the growth is in consumer markets and emerging markets where PCs are mainly sold through shops, isn't that rather bad news for you and the direct model? How do you respond to that criticism?
Let me point out this, an interesting side fact, and that is that had the direct model never existed, all PCs would be sold through shops, right?
Yeah.
Keep going.
So you're going to open some shops then?
Well, let's think about what's happened. Let's start with the U.S. consumer market. Okay, U.S. consumer market in the last 5 years, we grew from 6% share to about 30% share. In fact, you know, we sell more than the top 3 or 4 or 5 shops you can name combined, and we use this thing called the internet. Maybe you've heard of it. And it's quite popular, you know, for people to use when buying computers. So, you know, I've heard that. We have some form of you know, lots of different ways to introduce ourselves to customers. We have kind of kiosks that we experiment with, Dell Direct stores, where we kind of present the product in a physical advertising form. But what we've seen actually is that you know, more and more the world is becoming fluent, understanding how to use and buy these products online or on the phone. And so if you actually plot the share that we have in all the markets we've gone in versus the number of years that we've been there, almost every market exceeds the United States. So when I look out the next 10 years, I actually believe you'll see more people going online instead of in the store. I mean, the store is inherently going to be more inefficient. You know, if they don't have a telephone, never seen a computer before, is the store going to be better? Absolutely, but that only happens one time. You know, so you know, we had last quarter we had over 400 million visits to Dell.com. By about 140 million unique users. So that tells me that a lot of people are figuring out how to do it online, and ultimately that's going to be a better economic model for us and for the customer.
So once people have bought a PC in a shop, they can then use it to go to Dell.com to replace their computer later.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there once was a place called Computerland. I don't think they're around anymore. And they had a saying which was, come to Computerland to make friends with the future. Right? That was their saying. Well, if we had friends, when you've made friends with the future, come to Dell. Simple as that.
And on that note, I think we're done.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks a lot.